Welcome, Matthias Canisius. We're Regional Director of Central Europe from SentinelOne. Yeah, we wanted to talk about a little bit what stays after the COVID-19 crisis. How will it change our lives in general, but more importantly, how will it change the security?
Yeah.
So, welcome, Matthias.
Hey, thanks a lot, Patrick, and yeah, happy to be here and to talk a little bit about what lessons learned we hopefully have or we might have in which direction we go. And yeah, obviously it's not really something we can nail down now. It's more speculation rather than pure facts. But what keeps me optimistic that that there will also be some positive gains out of COVID, some really lessons learned, is the fact that I think we reacted pretty fast, and we reacted pretty good. Also, very conservative kind of industries moved super fast towards a complete home office environment. Signature processes which were analog in the past moved to digital signatures, and a lot of things happened. And I think we as an economy and as an industry, we did that really well, and that makes me optimistic that we also take some gains out of that crisis and move towards a probably more, let's say, more flexible and more open workspace, right? So to me the headline for what stays or what should stay is we need to embrace remote work. That to me is the headline, because the first thing, I mean, there are different surveys you can look at. The net of all of those surveys is in home office you are more productive than in the office. You are losing certain other things like the water boiler, water cooler conversation and stuff like that. That's for sure. But the pure productive work is higher rated in the home office space. So that means there are also some productivity gains, even if there's no crisis. And the second thing is, I think this will not be the last crisis. And yeah, definitely not. It might not be pandemic one. It might also be a volcano. It might be a atomic manufacturing plant. We all don't want this to happen. We also didn't want that COVID happened. But I mean, we need to be prepared. And I think COVID showed that we reacted pretty well, but we were not really set up that this happened.
So, but then, I mean, I agree. I think there will be a lot of changes when it comes to remote work. But one of the things which is sort of a red line when talking more to the industry, cybersecurity industry, is definitely that there are some risks as well. When you do remote work, specifically, usually your home network is not as secure as a corporate network. So how do you see that issue?
No, definitely, and it's always a trade-off, right, between productivity and security. So the highest security you get is not connecting to anything, but that is obviously not an option because we can't work productively. So it is a thin line between both usually. You're absolutely right. If you are connecting your computer into your home network, you are connecting it to an untrusted network, period. I mean, not only the fact that probably your family can have access to it if you want, or if you don't want, you have kids at home. In COVID, you have even more kids at home, or more often at least, and stuff like this. So this is one piece, but definitely I'm in my home network. I have 15 or 20 network devices which do something, which run a certain OS or an embedded OS or whatever, but I have no idea really what is happening. And I'm going out in the internet over a $20 whatever router with whatever software on it, right? So that means I think to a certain extent we have to deal that. We of course can provide our stuff with home office firewalls and gateways and some gear, let's call it, to make sure we are kind of splitting our networks and having a home part and a part we're using for professional work. So there's a lot of stuff we can do on that. But I think and that's also why we as a vendor, as SentinelOne, are probably one of the ones that are not dramatically touched by the crisis. It's probably even the other way around, because companies try to get a solution that protects their endpoints on one hand, gives them the full visibility, are easy to operate, and do not rely too much on cloud latencies, right? So that means that, at a certain extent, most solutions need to use cloud analytics in order to come to an assessment. And we don't need all that. So that means we have a little analyst, a little SOC analyst, if you want, on each and every single endpoint, looking at every process, as every single process, no matter if it's good or if it's bad. You only need 1 to 2% of CPU, so you don't even feel that something is happening. You don't need any signatures, so that means you don't need updates on an hourly base and stuff like that. And we see, as I said, every process, good or bad, and have, based on machine learning, have several engines, if you want to, that allow you to say, okay, this process is moving in that direction and is performing all sorts of evil. We have to stop that. And that is, as I said, happening on the endpoint itself, and that's a big chance to make out of that piece of hardware that you're using to access through whatever environment, even if you're traveling, make it a pretty safe environment where it's really difficult to get harmed on that. But that's only one piece, obviously. So the remote access strategy is part of that. Yeah, I guess that's one of the important pieces. And what we're also going to see is we're going to see a lot more movements towards the cloud, I think. I mean, in Germany, you're an international magazine, but I'm a German, and the Germans are still pretty cloud averse, right? So, cloud.
Indeed.
Yes. And I think it comes down to using the cloud, working with the cloud rather than relying on it. And that's also what we also do. I mean, we have certain information in the cloud, but we don't rely on it. So we process the good and the bad stuff or we assess the good and the bad stuff on the device itself, but we don't, and in order to do that, we don't rely on the cloud really. So that means that's also something which we're going to see, moving information, moving all sorts of processes into the cloud to have them accessible from everywhere and have them accessible from a secure, a really secure device. I guess that's also one thing we're going to see.
Okay. Now, when talking about endpoint security in general, I mean, endpoint security is probably sort of the first domain of security, which of cybersecurity, which existed, right? I mean, antivirus software was definitely one of the first. But these days, you have cloud security. There's a lot of cloud security vendors, rising, and also. I think I noticed a tendency that the cybersecurity in general is looking more at the data rather than the infrastructure in the past, I don't know, 1 or 2 years. So how do you see endpoint security involved in that scenario?
Yeah, it's really it's an interesting change. We see. I usually worked for Palo Alto Networks and NetScreen and Checkpoint even 20 years ago. So I was a network security guy, I would call it, right? And if I look into the reality now, I mean, what can I really do on the network level, right?
Yeah.
We have still firewalls, and that's a good thing. And we do microsegmentation. We now moved from trust and untrust towards a zero trust model, which makes total sense in my opinion. Which is also kind of motivated by the fact that we are working not only from the office, and that we are not only connected towards the corporate network, that we have remote users and stuff like that. So there's I mean, in the industry we are talking since a while and saying the perimeter is dead. And I guess that is a pretty that nails it down. That's really the point. So that means, I mean, where can I do something now? And the only and the door towards the network is the endpoint. And you said something very, very important. And I would introduce a new 3 magic letters like the American vendors love to do. Acronyms, I guess, is the right
exactly,
right word. Yes. So we moved from antivirus, which is a signature. I mean, I have somebody has stolen something. We know the criminal. We take the criminal, put it on the laptop. Once somebody enters my device, I look into my database. Have I seen this guy before? Is he good or bad? Oh, I've seen it before. He's bad. Done. So that's how signatures work, right? That's very simple. But there was a time then where we have combined that with other technologies, and we moved from AV to endpoint protection platform. So we added device control, we added DLP, we added all sorts of stuff to it. So we moved towards a real endpoint suite, which has the acronym EPP, Endpoint Protection Platform. We all know that. Then we found out, oh shit, I have so many new criminals on a daily basis, I can't cope with that. It doesn't simply work that I put all of them on the laptop or on my device at the point I would need it. I mean, that was when we were talking about ATPs, about 0 days and stuff like that. And that was the rise of the EDR, endpoint detection and response. So that means detection kind of suggests that I need, and you said it in your before, that suggests that you need to process something. You can't detect anything if nothing is moving. Right? So that means we protect it. We have seen this is very limited. Now we need to detect and to articulate a proper response, right? Which is usually on execution or even post execution. The challenge with that indeed is it's very labor intense. It's pretty complex. You're looking after fragments, after the needle in the haystack. And you need a truckload of people for that. And I mean, how should that scale in the mid-sized business, right? Especially. And where are most of innovations happening? It's in the mid-sized industry. Large organizations, they implement and integrate. Innovation happens in the mid-sized business, especially in Germany.
Yeah.
And now the question is, what's happening next? And the next thing we see, and not only we see, I think we're going to hear a lot about that in the next 12 months. And now the magic 3 letters coming is so AV, EPP, EDR has evolved towards XDR. You probably have heard it, you probably not. Some vendors start to use it. It's like in the firewall days. We had the firewall, then we moved towards a UTM, a unified threat management system, which combined all sorts of technologies, and then it evolved even further to the next generation application-based firewall, which was introduced 10 years ago by Palo Alto Networks. And now this was 10 years back, and now after 10 years we have the same. We will see the same in the endpoint security. I don't say endpoint protection. I say endpoint security industry. And what was the unified threat management system in the firewall area, combining IDP, firewalling, and all sorts of stuff, and make it one, will now converge. I don't like the word, but I have to use it. Okay. Will now converge towards an XDR. And XDR literally says, I'm combining the beauty of, or the need of an EPP, what I can do with an EDR, and I add to that 2 things. I add to it a lot of automatism and autonomic, I would call it, capabilities based most of the time based on machine learning. So that means that the human interaction that I usually have, due to the fact that I need to detect and respond, I need to take all the snippets and try to create story in order to see, is it really an indicator that I was compromised, or is it just something which is I don't need to care about. So I take all that, try to automate as much as I can, so that at the end, due to a sound protection that I have to take care and assess also the easy stuff, due to the fact that I start to really detect and respond, we call it active EDR, in very automatically, that at the end only leaves a very small, stays a very small amount where I need to decide as a human being, so that I have a full chain of protection, detection, response, and mitigation in one piece, running autonomous on an autonomous agent. In our case, it really is an autonomous agent running on the endpoint itself, that allows also a mid-sized company that doesn't run a large SOC or even doesn't have a SOC running and getting the beauty out of those capabilities that were, especially EDR, is something that in the past was something that only the top, let's say, 50 companies in Germany were capable of realizing. And the X, that's the second piece. So the second piece is the X, and this is something you touched also on. The X suggests also, it was before it was an EDR, now it's an XDR, and this suggests exactly what you're saying. It is really not enough to look only in the endpoint, and the endpoint is a server, is a workload, but we have to look into virtual environments. We have to look into cloud workloads. The next revolution we're gonna see, outside of security, is based on the virtualization in containerization, right? Docker, Kubernetes. What groundbreaking difference did bring VMware once they virtualized the server? And now we are virtualizing or abstracting even on the OS and going one level higher, right? And you need an answer to that. So that means cloud workload protection is a piece, or IoT is the same one. And that means the X means you need all the information, the visibility, not only on the classical, typical endpoints, you need it in the virtual environments, you need it in the cloud workloads, and you also need it in the IoT space, as your device is constantly talking with some network devices like printers and so on and so forth, and you need visibility. And I guess that is the future of endpoint security. And this is very likely what we hear in future, like XDR or unified endpoint security, or whatever you want to call it. We call it XDR.
Okay, but that's definitely interesting. Well, not concept, because I think you're absolutely right. And you mentioned also the container security, right?
Yes.
And I believe you have just announced a product which deals with that
Exactly.
specifically. And then, of course, as you mentioned, there's IoT now. How about because if you look at all those different X's in that regard,
Yeah, that's
X's,
very good.
yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. There's different operating systems. Well, most of them are probably based on Linux in some way, but nevertheless, isn't that difficult to maintain?
Yes and no. So point one, there's no alternative.
Okay, true enough.
Obviously. So we are for the core, for the typical endpoints, we support Mac, Linux, and obviously Microsoft. And the heart of it is similar. So the way that we look at processes, the way we tackle them, we assess them, that is pretty similar. But obviously, we have to include ourselves into the kernel, and the kernel is different on any OS. So therefore, we have also different teams: the Linux team, the Microsoft team, and the Mac team. And they have special knowledge on that, and so let's say the core functionality and the way we approach a process and we assess it and we judge it, the mathematical models behind and so on, that is similar. But the way we integrate this into the individual kernels, that is the specialization. And as I said, there's no alternative. And we really support, all sorts of Windows. Red Hat is a customer of us, for example. And we are working very close with these vendors to make the stuff happen. On the cloud workload, for example, we are using our Linux agent. to support that. And we are sitting like a sidecar in the pod and are able to assess every single node. And also really, we are able to see the full process behavior and are able also to respond and react on that. It's beautiful, really. And but you're right. That's challenging, but without an alternative.
Yeah. Okay. Well, talking about alternatives, there was actually I've had a conversation lately with a company who is dealing or is dealing with self-protecting data. So in essence, what they are saying is that all of the security which is needed are built into the data.
Yeah, that security by design is also a concept that is related to that. To be honest, I'm not an expert in that, but what I can tell you is endpoint security is not the only and final solution, period. And the way I look at security, coming, as I said, from a firewalling vendor, I also sold web application firewalls and load balancers with F5 networks. So I regard security like, to me, it's like a body. It's like a human body, and you have a brain that could be your Zim, for example, or something where everything ends. And we are probably the legs, right? And you need all sorts of that. And I mean, you also need your veins. This is your network, and we all know that you cannot do a lot of stuff probably when it comes to security. But still, if you segment, it still makes sense, and it's part of your security. And usually the way applications and data is designed is it should work. Usually the security aspect comes third or fourth, right? So let's make it work. We want to have a good user experience, and after that we probably think about, okay, have we coded in a secure way? Have we made sure that I cannot do an SQL injection due to whatever? So I think it is an important aspect you touched on. I have my doubts in a term that, as I said, in this aspect, functionality comes first, usually. User experience comes first, and security comes second. In an ideal world, I would fully agree.
Yeah, that's. But I think that's a shift we're also seeing towards a more security by design. But I like the analogy with the body, because in that analogy, I think the self-protecting data would probably be the white blood cells, maybe.
Yes, wonderful. Exactly.
Absolutely makes sense. A very, very nice analogy. I'll take that over.
And the thing is, I mean, our body has not changed when it comes. We have still two arms and we have still two legs, but the way we dress, the way we behave, the way we do things changed over time. I mean, cultural. I mean, it's obviously a very long period that things have changed. I still don't. I mean, most people don't have hairs on their back anymore. It's another one, but but and obviously in the IT space, we still will have different components, but also the components will change. And I think we are relying much less on network security these days than we do on really trying during execution, getting an idea what is really happening, because good applications or wanted processes use the same methods, the same tools, like PowerShell, for example, then the bad guys use to get onto your system. So PowerShell or especially fileless malware is an extremely good example on that. You use something which is a 99.9% wanted, and you can use, you trigger a certain behavior on a system, and you use exactly the same to trigger a bad behavior. And how shall your system assess what is meant to be good and what is meant to be bad? And that's where we come into play with process analytics on a behavioral base on the system itself.
Okay. Now spanning back to the current, not the body. I could go on hours on that. I mean, just to give you an example, I've had another conversation, and that guy said that apparently there was an economist who said, like, there's 60 years innovation cycles in any big industry, and he said 2010 was sort of the starting cycle for cybersecurity. If you look at 2010, that's when SIEM systems were not invented, but so actually that's coming back to the analogy of the body. Maybe in the past 20, 30 years, what cybersecurity did was actually forming the body. It started with network security, so the veins, the nerves were first. SIEM, you mentioned, that came in, and you had a head. Endpoint security, you had your legs and arms. It's a very good analogy. I mean, as I said, I could go on hours. Yeah. I wanted actually to spend the circle back to the how do we get out of the crisis, and what do you recommend for companies, with more remote work, less traveling, and all that, what we hopefully see after this crisis?
I mean, as I said, the bottom line is they need to have a sound strategy on how to embrace remote work. I mean, to me, that is the center of it, right? I mean, and it sounds completely banal, obviously, but I mean, we have responded pretty good. We have responded pretty fast, but I think we were yet hit it in a situation that we didn't expect it, right? So it came by surprise, and even by myself, COVID, China, but it came close, and the first case, and suddenly somebody says you're not allowed any longer to leave the home. I said, what? And I mean, I'm working from home office since 17 years. I don't care really. I mean, I have everything set up, and it's working. I have my VPN, I have all that stuff. But I mean, look at these, especially here in Cologne, we have some big insurances and large buildings. They are dead empty, and everybody needed a laptop or something similar, or working from his home device. And I think I can only recommend any company to rethink how they want to collaborate, to use the cloud, not rely on it, to have really probably even do a fire drill or a remote work drill every half a year or something like that, and really give I mean, and especially you're making your company as an employer, as somebody who wants to find the right employers. You make yourself even more attractive. Everybody that is young these days and starts his professional career is looking for flexibility. And the more you can offer that, and the more you're creating a trusted environment where security and EIT is only the tool, the more qualified people you will also attract in the future. Rethink your architecture, re-architect your remote access, and being prepared for everybody is working from home. I mean, it sounds, as I said, it sounds banal, and we can, if you're talking to a technical or to system engineer, he can give you a thousand examples. But the bottom line is being prepared and embrace the remote work.
Okay, thanks, Matthias.